А потім питаю, які там ризики адвокації, що собою являється взагалі.
Адвокація? Добре.
It's May 9, Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Vasil Samokhvalov, and now we will be talking about the representation of Ukrainian interests in the United States, which is called in a word advocacy. We will be talking with Evelina Kurilets, director at Razom for Ukraine, Charitable Foundation. We know that you've come today for a reason. You were attending the Ukrainian Action Summit, which took place in Washington, D.C. You've heard a lot, you've seen a lot, so probably my first question will be as follows. What is the support of Ukraine in the United States of America for the time being? Right, good afternoon everybody. Razom for Ukraine has two legal entities, one of which is registered with the United States of America, which was founded upon the Revolution of Dignity, and another is the legal entity in Ukraine, and I'm the executive director in Ukraine. It was important to have the Ukrainian voice heard by the congressman whom we met at the summit. This is why some representatives from Ukraine were present during that summit as well. So first, it was organized in year 2022 after the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. This year's summit is the second one. It was organized by the coalition in partnership with the American Coalition for Ukraine. During that summit, there were more than 350 participants attending, which represented 62 organizations from 34 different states of America. There were panel discussions, meeting with the congressmen in the Congress, sharing of expertise, meetings with donors and representatives of Congress and Senate. All those events allowed to have that summit held on a high level, and it demonstrated an example of American democracy in action. During this summit, we were able to have more than 150 meetings with the representatives of American Congress. The voters from the United States of America who represent the small homes from different parts of the world, and now they call the United States their home. And for the United States congressmen, it's important to hear the needs of their voters, and this is why the meetings were organized, where we were talking about the importance of support of Ukraine for these people, specifically the support of certain laws. And the great achievement here is that we were able to have meetings with 1/3 of the office in Congress. During the meetings, we discussed such events as support for Ukraine in terms of expansion of sanctions against Russian Federation, recognition of Wagner as a terroristic organization, recognition of Russian activities in Ukraine as the genocide of Ukrainian people, and the condemnation of deported Ukrainian children. Also, what we discussed was the arrest of Russian assets abroad. We were talking a lot about the condition, the status of those initiatives, and how we can reinforce and expedite their consideration by the Congress. And the summary of that meeting was the press conference in the capital of the United States of America that had such participants as former President of Ukraine, Viktor Yushchenko, Copter, and the resolution bipartisan support of Ukraine was announced there. The resolution is very important because it stipulates this term was the victory of Ukraine. There will be no ambiguous interpretation of this term. We say that the victory of Ukraine will be returned to its borders as of 1991. We say that the United States of America will continue to support Ukraine, to have it integrated into international coalitions in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The United States will lobby the Ukrainian interests in terms of handover of Russian property for the sake of compensation for reparations. And we see the support of Ukraine, we see the support of Ukrainian citizens all around the world, and we can count on Ukraine getting reparations, and that the crimes committed by the aggressor will be condemned and the persons guilty will be brought to liability. Thank you very much. So regarding the advocacy, what is the advocacy of interests of Ukraine in the United States of America now? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? What are the challenges? Advocacy is quite a new word. In fact, it's like standing someone's ground, your ground, and there is a number of tools for advocacy of Ukrainian interests, and this lobbying, this advocacy can be done by whoever, by each one of us. Talking about the advocacy of interests of Ukraine by our team, the team of Razom for Ukraine Foundation, is the sharing of expertise, sharing of resources, and one of the examples of such unification of efforts is the creation of this American Coalition for Ukraine. More than 40 organizations, Baltic, Syrian, Georgian organizations, they sit united. The people whose small homeland, or the homeland of whose ancestors is located somewhere else outside the United States, but now they call US their home, and they share the values, the democratic values, and many of them also suffered from Russian Federation. This is why they understand the meaning of sanctions, they understand what is justice, they understand what is legal liability, and together with us they were organizing this summit. They were holding the meetings with the congressmen, with their representatives in Congress. With us, they continue doing this advocacy. Talking about other tools, it may be making Ukrainian voices heard, the popularization of Ukrainian culture, and every student who lives abroad for study, every person coming to the United States is the representative of Ukraine, and depending on whether we speak the same language, how we how we communicate our thoughts, what we tell about Ukraine, this is the advocacy which can be done by each and every of us. Another important tool that can be used by the organizations is the mobilization of American communities, and many local organizations such as Florida for Ukraine and many others, they mobilize, they share their experience, they share information, they share their expertise, how to communicate with their congressmen, how to make their voice heard. It's a very efficient tool of advocacy work, and obviously extremely important factor is the expertise. Fund Razom for Ukraine has a legal entity in Ukraine. We implement 4 out of 5 areas of our work, the projects in those areas. One of the projects is called Project Relief, the organization of work on for the organizations which are located in the small settlements, small villages. For those who know every street, every building, we support our defenders, we work with the medical institutions, so this expertise is very important. So while advocating the interests of Ukraine, expertise plays a very important role. So I cannot help but asking about the role of your organization in this process, maybe in interesting cases, in facts and figures. Well, sure, we are proud of being a part of this fund, Razom for Ukraine Foundation, because unfortunately no single organization is capable of accumulating the amount of resources which are necessary to stand for Ukraine all alone. But we have not to forget that we have to prepare to the fact of the victory, and not only to the fact of the victory, but to the examination that Ukraine is about to pass within the first couple of years after the victory, because we will be observed how efficiently we will be able to use that support which will be provided for Ukraine. And the foundation, Razom for Ukraine, we understand the importance of cooperation, of partnership. This is why we're one of the founders of the American Coalition for Ukraine. It's one of the most powerful instruments of Ukrainian support, and the foundation was taking part in the organization in partnership with other organizations of 2 successful summits of action for Ukraine, which were held in Washington DC. And in December last year, the Congress of the United States adopted the law which enables the transition of the arrested Russian assets to Ukraine. Unfortunately, before the adoption of that law, it was impossible legally, and after the second summit, the legislative priorities that were described in these brochures, it's one of the specimens of the brochures that were issued to all the participants. So in that brochure, the legislative initiatives are described, in which we were asking to discuss with the local congressmen. There were codes, their names described what to talk about in terms of these initiatives. And those initiatives, they were enjoying significant support. They are called co-sponsors. But again, if we translate it properly, it's co-authors. So a huge number of both Democrats and Republicans, they decided to support these legislative initiatives, and I think it's a huge victory of this summit. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on the floor? Good afternoon, Nadia Yurchenko, Ukrinform. I have just 2 questions. You say this summit of action for Ukraine, so who will act after this summit? Is it going to be your organization, or you just communicated your initiatives and then it's up to the congressmen who will develop the draft laws, who will develop legislation? And another question was, what was your conclusion after that summit? What is the sentiment of the charitable organizations? Are they going to support Ukraine incessantly, or they want to make a pause to see how the counteroffensive, for example, what will it result in, and then act upon those events? Well, we understand that when you're in coalition with someone, you're stronger, and when you have Ukrainian organizations and the organizations of other countries standing by your side, those who suffered from Russian aggression, it makes you stronger. So the presence of 62 other organizations by our side, including 45 from the coalition Razom for Ukraine, or Action for Ukraine, it reinforces us a lot, because they represent almost all of the states from the United States of America. And as to the legislative initiatives described in this brochure, they are already developed, but it's important to lobby their consideration by the Congress. This is why we organize the meetings between the citizens of the United States of America with their congressmen, with their representatives who are capable of influencing the adoption of those legislative initiatives. So it's not only our work, we are involved in this work, and we think that it's something that we need to do to get united around the common goal. And regarding your second question, there was no feeling of tiredness during the summit. There was a strict plan of action, strict instructions, recommendations, meetings, panels with the donors, legislators, just with the regular participants, with the citizens of the United States of America. I was impressed by the stories of the people who were the citizens of the United States, but during the full-scale invasion they were in Ukraine. I was asking them, why are you here? They were saying, I'm a serviceman from the United States of America. I was here in Ukraine when it all started. I've seen those elderly women on the trains. I've seen those kids on the planes, on the trains. I'm sorry. I remember their cries. I think it's unfair. I was grown in a country where there are values, the country which thinks that there are things worth fighting for. And there were such people in that summit. They were numerous there. As a Ukrainian who came there for a little bit more than 2 weeks, I had a bag with the flag of Ukraine on it, and everybody who was seeing that bag, they were coming up to me and asking, how long have you been with the States? In the States? And I said, I'm here for 2 weeks only, and they expressed their support in all ways possible. They said, we support you against the aggression, and there was no single case of aggression or resistance against Ukraine that I was feeling. And I was among the people for all the time. I was using public transport, for example, there. I was walking along the streets, so I was feeling support not only from the people from those civil organizations who were attending those meetings in the Congress, but also from the average Americans. And it's important because we're not alone in this war, really.
Climate Pacific Rex. According to the latest published figures, the U.S. gave something like $484 billion from individual and corporate donors in 2021. And I'm wondering if you have current figures for Razom. Mm-hmm. And also, is it your sense that Americans that want to donate to Ukraine know how to do it, and that they trust that their money is going to go to the intended causes? Mm-hmm. A lot of people that I talk to don't know how to do this.
Mm-hmm. Наразі, якщо ми говоримо про фонд Разом, в нас є податковий статус.
Talking about the Razom for Ukraine Foundation, we have a tax status which stipulates that we can raise donor funds in the United States of America. There is a number of such foundations in the United States, and they are rather big. We can talk about United Help Ukraine, Razom for Ukraine Foundation, and a number of smaller ones which are local organizations. And as to the reporting, how it can be done, I'm convinced, for example, in our website we have a big button how to support, both in Ukrainian and English language versions. You can not only support it with the funds, but you can volunteer. We have volunteers all around the world. We have volunteers from around the world working in our storage facilities in the United States. You can not only donate money to our account, but you can order something online and send it directly to us if you want to support us in some specific way. I understand that this is one of the most important questions that I was asked about the efficiency of spending the funds. Within 1 year we got this expertise, the knowledge that I got. I didn't know half of what I know now a year ago, and I appreciate the input of the experts from many industries who provided me with their expertise: paramedics, medics, psychologists, military, people from different industries. And the way we look before the full-scale invasion, for example, the eye effect, that it looks completely different now because the need of paramedics in Ukraine is different from the recommendations that we were provided by the paramedics in the United States of America when we were discussing the components of that medic kit. And regarding the reporting, we have websites, we have resources, the pages on social media where we publish the video and photo reports. But besides the financial accounting, the financial reporting takes maybe 40% of my working time, because we put together the reports for the donors, for the American organizations. We submit the annual report. We pass audit in both in Ukraine and on international levels, so the number of inspection levels is extraordinary. I think that it can only say that we are ready to do anything, provide any information to make sure to convince the people that we use the money efficiently, that every dollar donated will reach those who need it most. Well, if I may ask for details, maybe the question was not so much about your organization specifically, but the narrative about the corruption and transparent use of the funds donated is a part of information campaign of Russia, who tries to decrease the level of support for Ukraine. So what are the tools? What should Ukraine do as the state and your organization to counter this information campaign? Well, I like the phrase of the former congressman who visited Ukraine. We had a couple of meetings with him during a couple of days. He said, I've realized that Ukraine is not only military and civils, it's the nation in war. Now every single person in Ukraine is involved in war to certain extent. Everybody understands the importance of continuous support of Ukraine. I, on my part, as the director of an organization, I pass audits, I gather paperwork, I pass international audits conducted by the certified auditing organizations. It's not easy, but I understand that it allows me continue talking about the transparency of activities of Razom in Ukraine and our organization in general. As to other organizations, unfortunately, we all understand that corruption, well, saying that corruption is non-existent is just plain stupid. Unfortunately, it exists. And for me, when we talk about reconstruction of Ukraine, it's important to say that we should not reconstruct everything. We should only restore something that is strong and efficient, but we should leave behind some things that we don't need. We should leave it in the past, and each of us should think that we have a chance to build the Ukraine where we want to live, where our children want to live, and we have to answer this question: what should Ukraine look like? The Ukraine where I would like to live in. And I answer this question. I want transparency, and I'm sure that such organizations are numerous in Ukraine. The people who want to walk that path with me, those who fight for Ukraine, even staying abroad, they understand the importance of it. So please tell me what is necessary. I think that Ukrainians are capable of everything now. Those quests that we had to fulfill, we are ready for everything now. Any more questions?
In terms of messaging, I'm wondering if you could clarify the difference to Americans, the difference between your organization and United 24, which gets a lot of publicity. Is there any difference from the American perspective in terms of 501c3s with a U.S. anchor? Does the money go to different places?
Ну, дивіться, ми є певні...
Секундочку, теж дякую.
Just a second, I apologize for hurrying up. Since our founders is the American organization, so the Ukrainian organization has to comply not only with Ukrainian legislation but with American legislation as well. We understand that we cannot, for example, import any weapons, no combat drones. We realize it very clearly, and all the funds that we raise, we spend for the goods that are legal, that we can procure in a legal manner. We have a number of areas. We can say about 5 main areas of our work, like advocacy, summit meetings with Congress, but it's very important work too in terms of support of Ukraine, the search for proper ways of restoration and reconstruction. Another area is relief. The project for building the civil society in Ukraine by supporting smaller organizations locally, and it provides us with certain expertise all around Ukraine. Another project is health. It's the support with medicines, medical equipment, psychological centers for those who were affected by the war across Ukraine. Another project is Heroes, communications means, tablets, the TechMed, the emergency, the ambulances for evacuation, for medical evacuation of the wounded ones from the front lines, and the last project is culture, which makes the Ukrainian voices heard all around the world, telling about the modern Ukraine, not that associative sequence that people abroad usually have, the post-Soviet country. But we say that many people here speak English, for example. They speak the languages of European Union. People have higher education. They are ready to reform the country, to change, to study, and so on and so forth. Well, thank you very much. I think that was pretty comprehensive. We don't have any more questions, and we will wrap up in this optimistic note. Joining us was Evelina Kurilets, the director at Razom for Ukraine Charitable Foundation, and we will continue our work tomorrow. See you. Bye.